I used to hear the future. It wasn't a metaphor, and it wasn't some hopeful figure of speech. I mean, I literally heard it, just a few minutes a day, always at a random time. Ever since I could remember, it would come like a crackling radio station tuning itself in. Static at first, sometimes garbled nonsense, but then a voice, a sound, a headline, a laugh, a scream. From exactly 1 year into the future. No, I don't know why, I don't know how, but I stopped questioning it a long time ago. At first, it was small things. When I was a kid, I heard my dad shouting about how the Patriots had blown the Super Bowl 12 months before it happened. I told him, he laughed, but I remembered the date. When it came around and I heard the exact same rant I'd heard a year before, my stomach turned cold. That was the first time I realized it was real. I kept it to myself after that. I never told anyone else, not my teachers, not my friends, not my wife. Because once I got older, I realized the voices could make me rich, and they did. It started with sports betting. A few big wins, then stocks, headlines, CEO firings, mergers, bankruptcies, all screamed out of radios or news broadcasts I'd hear through the static. Sometimes it was just the elevator music from a future shopping mall, but other times it was gold. I moved fast, invested smart, and worked in the shadows. Never too obvious, always just enough. By the time I turned 30, I had a mansion, 2 homes overseas, and a financial portfolio that would make a senator salivate. But none of that matters now, because today, the voices stopped. Not static, not gibberish, not background noise, just silence. And that terrifies me more than anything I've ever heard. Today is June 15th. It started like every other morning, me in the kitchen of my sterile $1 million condo, sipping overpriced black coffee from a mug labeled First Future CEO. I always found that funny, considering I technically already knew the future. Not all of it, just slivers, glimpses, 3, maybe 5 minutes a day. But that was always enough. I'd gotten so used to it that I built my routine around it. Wake up, check futures market, make quick adjustments, wait for the voices. They always came, always. Never at the same time, never with the same content, but they always came, until today. 8 a.m., nothing. 9:32 a.m., nothing. 11:47 a.m., still nothing. The silence settled on my shoulders like wet cement. I stared out the window at the city skyline. My office was in that tall mirrored building across the way, but I rarely went anymore. I didn't need to. All my trades were remote, all my staff were bought, and when I did go in, it was mostly for show. The genius billionaire who predicted trends with uncanny accuracy. That was the legend I'd allowed to spread. But my genius was always borrowed, and now I couldn't hear a damn thing. By noon, I was pacing my living room, still holding the now cold mug. I even tried to force it, like some idiot trying to tune a radio that's already unplugged. "Come on," I muttered. "Just give me something. Anything." Silence. My heartbeat picked up. That shouldn't have happened. I've had bad days, sure, times where the voice was mumbled or overlapping. But even then, something came through. A jingle, a cough, a single word. Today, nothing. It was like the world had gone mute. I pulled out my notebook. It was leather-bound, worn at the edges, filled with years of scribbled dates and the sounds I'd heard. It looked insane, like the ramblings of a paranoid schizophrenic, but to me, it was sacred. June 15th. What did I hear last year? I flipped back to the entry. Crowd screaming, glass breaking, woman yelling, "Oh my God, he has a gun!" Sirens. It was vague but not unusual. That day, I had bet against a certain mall chain's quarterly projections. The next year, there was a mass shooting in one of their flagship stores. Stock plummeted. I profited. Cold, I know, but it was business. I never caused these things. I just listened. So why wasn't I hearing today's future? What was happening a year from now that was so big, so blank that there was nothing? My skin prickled. I didn't go into the office. I canceled my meetings. I sat at home replaying old tapes, scanning news alerts, and trying to trigger the voices. At 3 p.m. I even stood in the exact same spot I was in last year when I heard the mall shooting clip. But nothing came. Not a whisper, not a hum. By 6 p.m. I was drinking scotch and watching cable news with the volume turned low, hoping that maybe, just maybe, it would sync with something from the future and jog the signal loose. Nothing. At 8:12 p.m., I made the first bad decision of the day. I called my ex-wife. Her name is Lena. We divorced 4 years ago when she accused me of knowing things I shouldn't know. She was right, but that wasn't what ended us. What ended us was the look on her face when I failed to deny it. When I just smiled and said, "You wouldn't believe me anyway." She picked up after 3 rings. "Is everything okay?" she asked immediately. "You sound weird." "I do?" My voice cracked. I needed to ask you something. Do you hear strange things sometimes? Like audio that doesn't match anything?" There was a pause. "You mean like hallucinations?" "No, not like that. Just sounds, voices, maybe from somewhere else, maybe from later." Silence on the line. "No," she said. "You still doing those weird predictions? Lena, you're rich now. You should be happy. Why are you calling me about this?" I didn't answer. I couldn't explain it. I just needed to know I wasn't alone, that I wasn't broken, that something wasn't coming. She sighed. "Whatever it is, I'm sure you'll be fine. You always are." She hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time, then I turned it off. By midnight, I still hadn't heard anything. And then something worse happened. At 12:03 a.m., I realized that tomorrow's prediction had also not come through. That was when the panic started. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me, watching the blades blur into a soft hum. I thought maybe I'd drift off and the voice would come to me in my dreams, but even in sleep I heard nothing. Just silence, heavy, cold, suffocating silence. At 2:27 a.m., I sat up in a cold sweat and checked the time again, as if the clock was lying to me. It wasn't. I tried the white noise machine next to my bed. That used to help. The voices often came through it, like a frequency piggybacking on ambient static. I turned it up, loud, sat beside it, waited, nothing. By 4 a.m. my hands were shaking. I had relied on this gift, if you could call it that, for over 2 decades. It was like oxygen. It was my edge, and now it was gone, just gone, as if someone had reached across time and cut the wire. I wasn't just afraid, I was unraveling. By sunrise, I was a wreck. I showered, got dressed, and decided to go to the office for the first time in weeks, not because I needed to, but because I had to do something. Sitting still was letting the silence win. I took the elevator up to the 54th floor. The doors opened to polished marble floors and the faint smell of citrus cleaner. My assistant, Jordan, greeted me like I'd risen from the grave. "Mr. Carter, you're actually here?" "Yeah," I muttered, walking past him. "Don't get used to it." Inside my glass-walled corner office, I pulled the blinds shut. Then I sat at my desk and stared at the monitors. Financial tickers, news crawls, futures projections. All meaningless without my edge. I tried listening again. I turned on every device I could think of. Bluetooth speakers, old radios, streaming services set to low volume, analog TV signals, even a baby monitor someone had left in the tech room. I sat in the middle of it all like a madman. Still nothing. A dull pressure started behind my eyes. I realized I hadn't eaten in nearly a day. I didn't care. Then something occurred to me. What if the voices didn't stop? What if there was simply nothing to hear? The thought hit me like a truck. What if, exactly 1 year from today, there's no one left to speak? I went down to the research department. No one asked why. They were too shocked I was there. I logged into one of the supercomputer workstations and pulled up a simulation program I'd had commissioned years ago. It was designed to model cascading economic collapse using political, social, and climate data. I loaded it. Then I punched in a few new variables, ones that I never thought I'd have to account for. Full information blackout. No radio, no television, no satellite signals, no recorded speech. Nothing. The graph flatlined. Complete global communication silence meant one of two things. Either the planet had become uninhabitable, or everyone was dead. I left work early. By then, I wasn't thinking clearly. I kept having flashes of images in my head, stuff I hadn't heard but imagined. A child's shoe on cracked pavement, a blood-smeared supermarket aisle, an empty city with stoplights blinking red to no one. I tried to shake them off, but they stuck. That night, I didn't try to sleep. I sat in the dark with headphones on, running static loops, news radio, emergency broadcast archives, all white noise, all silence. Then I had an idea. There was one place where the voices had always come in strongest, an abandoned water tower outside of town. I discovered it in college. I used to go there with a portable recorder and just sit in the rusted dome. Something about the acoustics, the way the structure vibrated, it always helped. So at 3 a.m., I got in my car and drove. The road to the water tower was barely paved anymore. My tires crunched over gravel and dirt as I pulled up to the overgrown lot. Weeds scratched at the sides of my Mercedes like fingers. The tower stood silhouetted against the night sky, pale silver under the moonlight, tall, empty, listening. I climbed the old service ladder, heart pounding. Step by step, I ascended into the dome. When I got to the top, I slipped inside and sat cross-legged on the cool metal floor. My breath echoed faintly. I turned on the recorder, and I waited. For minutes, then for an hour. Then I started to cry. It was around dawn when I finally heard something. At first, I thought it was the wind, a hiss, a whimper. Then it grew sharper, like someone breathing into a microphone from far away. I held my breath. The recorder crackled. And then, just for a moment, I heard it. A voice, a whisper. One word, run. It was faint, garbled, like it had come through layers of time and static and pain. But I heard it, and I knew it was from the future. 1 year from today. June 15th next year. That voice wasn't speaking to the world, it was speaking to me. Run, that was all it said. One word, but it hit like a gunshot inside the steel shell of the water tower. The silence that followed was somehow worse, heavier, as if that single whisper had pulled something taut across reality, something fragile and breaking. I played it back. Again and again. Run. It wasn't my voice. It didn't sound like anyone I recognized, but the tone, it wasn't panic, it wasn't fear, it was resignation. Like the speaker already knew running wouldn't help. I didn't remember the climb down. I only remember being in my car, fingers trembling on the steering wheel. The sky was glowing purple with the first hints of morning, but the light didn't feel warm. It felt wrong, like the sun shouldn't be rising. I got home and immediately locked all the doors, turned off the lights and sat in the dark. Something had happened. Something massive. And now I had confirmation. This wasn't a glitch in my gift. This wasn't some mental breakdown or burnout. This was suppression. The future had been silenced. Except for that one last dying whisper. Why just that? Why me? I didn't leave the house for 2 days. I stopped answering phone calls, ignored emails, let my assets ride untouched. I sat at my desk and reviewed years of notes, every sound, every pattern, every anomaly. There had been a few warnings before, not messages exactly, but strange distortions. One time, I heard a siren that never existed in our current world, a pulsing, low-frequency moan that made my skin crawl. Another time, I heard laughter that sounded inhuman, like dozens of people trying to mimic joy but failing. At the time, I wrote it off as interference, a glitch. Now I wondered if those were early signs, harbingers, breadcrumbs. By the third day, I forced myself to move. I started looking for others. If this thing was happening to me, it had to be happening to someone else, right? I created a private message board on the dark web, posted in coded language using keywords from past future broadcasts. Phrases like temporal echo, reverse delay, 1-year frequency. A few cranks responded. Psychics, conspiracy nuts. But then, one user stood out. They used the name Echo Eater. All they posted was this: "It's not that the future is silent, it's that it doesn't exist anymore. Meet me. Denver, June 20th. The coordinates are embedded." They embedded GPS data into a blank .wav file. I played it. It was pure silence. But when I ran the spectrogram, the coordinates were burned into the waveform like a ghost. A location, abandoned building, Colorado. It was 5 days away. I booked the flight. I arrived in Denver under a false name. Disguises weren't something I'd needed before, but now every part of my instinct screamed that something was watching. I rented a beat-up Jeep and drove to the coordinates. They led to the outskirts of the city, an old telecommunications facility, long decommissioned. Faded signs still bore the logo of a now-defunct tech company, and the fence had rusted away in several places. I parked behind a collapsed satellite dish and waited. It was 1:03 p.m. when the knock came on my window. A man stood there, skinny, late 50s, wire-rimmed glasses, scruffy beard. Looked like someone who lived out of a backpack and didn't trust toothpaste. But his eyes were alert, too alert. "You Carter?" he asked. "Yeah." He climbed into the passenger seat. "I go by Edgar," he said, "but I know you as the listener." I stared at him. "You know who I am?" "I know what you've done, and I know what's about to happen if we don't stop it." My mouth went dry. "What did you mean by, the future doesn't exist anymore?" He looked out the windshield. "It's been erased." We sat in the Jeep for over an hour while he explained. According to Edgar, I wasn't the only one who could hear the future. There were others, scattered. Most didn't even know what they had. Some thought they were haunted, some thought they were going insane, but a few, like me, had learned to use it. "They call us echoes," he said, "and every echo hears a different sliver of what's to come. You hear audio. I see patterns and stock tickers. Another guy in Lisbon gets glimpses in his dreams." "How many of us are there?" I asked. "Not many, maybe 24 globally, and we were all fine. Until last year." "What happened last year?" Edgar looked me dead in the eyes. "Someone figured out how to cut the line. According to him, the future isn't fixed. It's not a recording. It's an active signal. Something being broadcast in a direction we're not supposed to receive. Like we've been picking up rogue transmissions through cracks in time. And now," Edgar said, "something, or someone, has found a way to intercept the signal, to block it, maybe even to rewrite it." I thought about the silence, the blank airwaves. "Why?" I asked. "Because the only way to control the future is to erase it first." We moved inside the shell of the old communications building. Edgar led me through warped hallways littered with broken equipment and spider webs. The air smelled like rust and dust and something older, something forgotten. We passed a collapsed break room with overturned chairs and a long-dead vending machine, and finally reached a steel-reinforced room hidden behind what used to be a server cluster. The walls were lined with strange devices, radios, computers, tuning forks mounted on curved plates, even what looked like a modified MRI coil. He called it the listening room. "I built this to amplify the residual signal," Edgar said. "If there's anything left of the future, it'll echo in here." I nodded slowly. "And have you heard anything?" Edgar hesitated. Then he reached into a filing cabinet and pulled out a series of tapes, analog, labeled with dates. The handwriting shook slightly on each one. He inserted one and hit play. Static, then a scream, short, guttural, human, then silence again. "That's what I caught 2 nights ago," Edgar said. "Where's it from?" He looked down. "Tomorrow." My skin prickled. It wasn't just that the future had gone quiet. It was leaking in little flashes of pain, like a dying star coughing out its last heat. "Whatever's coming," Edgar said, "it's not a war, not a plague, not something loud. It's a removal. One day we're here, and the next, we're not. The signal ends. The timeline stops broadcasting." I thought back to the whisper I'd heard. "Run." "Run from what?" I asked. But Edgar didn't have an answer. Over the next 2 days, Edgar and I reviewed his equipment and listened to hours of tape. Most were just noise, fluctuating static, warped tones, occasionally something faint in the background. But every so often, something clear would push through. Footsteps, crying, a knock that went on too long. None of it made sense, but every sample was time-stamped, and they all came from within the same week, June 15 to 22, 1 year from now. As if the world had only a handful of final recordings before it went dark. "There's something else," Edgar said, pulling out a folded sheet of paper from his notebook. "About 2 years ago, we started getting coordinated messages. Same content, different sources." He handed me the page. It was a typed transcript, dated June 20th, exactly 1 year from the day he'd contacted me. "The timeline will close. The signal will end. You had your chance. We are not gods. We only silence them." "What the hell is this?" I asked. Edgar looked older than he had before. The bags under his eyes were darker. His fingers twitched. "Something out there," he said. "Something upstream from us, beyond the timeline. I think they noticed us listening." He paused. "And I think they decided to shut the feed off." That night, I stayed in the listening room alone. Edgar had gone to sleep in a makeshift cot near the stairwell. I couldn't rest. I sat on the floor surrounded by analog machines, headphones pressed to my ears, waiting. I remembered the first voice I ever heard when I was 7, my mother calling for me from the kitchen. Except when I ran to her, she hadn't said anything yet. She was still setting the table. She dropped a plate when I told her she'd just called for me. Years later, when she was in hospice, I heard her voice again, whispering my name from the future. She died exactly 1 year later to the day, and now the future was trying to whisper something else. At 3:07 a.m., I heard it again, a breath. Then, "They're almost here." I jerked upright. My pulse slammed in my throat. I rewound the tape, listened again. Same voice, same whisper. Not mine, not Edgar's. Feminine, barely audible. Scared. I ran down the hallway to wake Edgar, but when I got to his cot, it was empty. "Edgar?" I called out. My voice echoed too far. The facility was silent. I moved through the building, flashlights scanning rusted walls, dust, trash, no footprints in the dirt but mine. Then I found the door. It was at the far end of the southern wing, down a hall we hadn't explored. A rusted steel slab with no knob, no hinges, just a faint outline in the wall. It hadn't been there yesterday. I pressed my ear to it. At first, nothing. Then, knocking. Slow, heavy. 3 knocks, then a pause, then 3 more. I stumbled back. That knock, I'd heard it before. On one of the tapes, the one that went on too long. I ran, back to the listening room, back to the equipment, but now every dial was lit. Every frequency screaming. The audio hissed with garbled voices and overlapping tones, none of it making sense. It was all happening too fast. Then, as quickly as it started, everything died. Every machine shut off. The lights blew out, and on the floor, where the old tape player had sat, were 2 words burned into the steel. Too late, too late. Those 2 words stared up at me like an accusation. I backed away from the scorched floor, heart slamming against my ribs. The air in the listening room had gone heavy, like the pressure had dropped, like the air itself was washing. Where the hell was Edgar? I ran back through the building, shouting his name, but only the echo of my own panic answered me. The hallways had changed, the turns were wrong. A corridor that led to the lobby now looped back to the stairwell. The layout was bending, folding inward like the building was curling in on itself. I finally found the main entrance, but it had fused shut. No handles, no gap under the door, just solid concrete and steel. I was trapped. Then I heard the voice again, not through a tape, not through static, not through a speaker. Inside my head. You shouldn't have listened. It was soft, intimate, like someone standing behind me, lips at my ear. I spun around, no one there. My vision swam. The world tilted, and for the first time in years I realized I was afraid in a way I hadn't been since I was a child. At some point, I must have passed out. I came to lying on the cold metal floor of the listening room, drenched in sweat, chest heaving. The equipment was back in place, untouched, no signs of power loss. No burn marks. The words "too late" were gone. Had I hallucinated, or had the building reset? I stumbled to my feet and checked the hallway. This time the layout was back to normal. The exit was unlocked. I fled. Outside, the sun was just starting to rise. I drove aimlessly, barely registering traffic. I ended up at a rundown motel on the edge of town and checked in under the name Daniel Shaw, my old college roommate. The man was dead now, drowned in a boating accident 5 years ago. I don't know why I used his name. It just felt safer. Inside the room, I peeled off my sweat-soaked clothes, collapsed onto the creaky bed, and stared at the ceiling fan. Spinning, whirring, just like mine back home. The past felt like a loop. So did the future, if it even still existed. I didn't hear from Edgar again. I called his burner number, disconnected. His online profiles vanished. It was like he'd never existed. I checked the GPS history from the Jeep, traced the route back to the facility, but when I drove there 2 days later, the building was gone. Not abandoned, gone. In its place was a grassy field, undisturbed, no tire marks, no fence, no power lines. Like the building had been surgically removed from the landscape. I got out of the car and stood in the field, shaking. And then I saw it. Near the center of the clearing, a scrap of paper flapping in the wind. I walked over and picked it up. It was torn, faded, burned at the edges. But I recognized the handwriting. It was Edgar's. If you're reading this, IT means they've started redacting. You're not safe. Find the others. Listen harder. The future I still trying to speak. And below it, hastily scrawled, June 21, the door opens. I checked the date. June 18th, 3 days. 3 days until, what? A doorway? A portal? An event? I had no way of knowing, but the word door immediately made me think of the one I'd seen in the hallway. Smooth, seamless, new. And the knock, that rhythmic, heavy knock. I had to move fast. Back in my penthouse, I accessed my secure records, audio logs, predictions, anomalies. I scrubbed through anything tagged near June 21st in any year. I found one entry, dated exactly 1 year ago. At the time, I thought it was corrupted, but now I wasn't sure. It was 12 seconds long, at first static. Then, a single phrase whispered over and over again, layered and distorted. The door opens, the door opens, the door opens. It repeats 8 times, then a click. Then silence, the same whisper I'd heard in the tower, the same breathy rhythm, the same voice, only now I was hearing it differently. Now it wasn't a warning, it was a countdown. 3 days, that's all I had. I didn't know what would happen on June 21st, but I knew it wasn't a metaphor. The door would open, and something would come through. I became obsessed with the phrase. I replayed that audio clip 100 times, dissecting each whisper, every subtle crackle between repetitions. There was something wrong with the pacing. Every third repetition had a faint echo beneath it, almost like another voice speaking beneath the surface. I ran it through audio filters, boosted different frequencies, tried spectral analysis. Eventually, I isolated the layer. It wasn't another door opens. It was a new message, buried deep, nearly inaudible. They've been listening to you too. I dropped my headphones. Someone, or something, wasn't just watching the future. They were watching me. I couldn't sleep. I barely ate. June 19th passed in a blur of paranoia. I closed all the blinds, turned off every connected device, pulled the SIM card from my phone, and used burner tech to contact fringe message boards and occult frequency groups. Most were lunatics, but one name kept appearing. Sabine, always in caps, no last name, no location. But she was the one other people said to talk to when time starts bleeding. Supposedly she didn't just listen, she could respond. That sounded impossible, ridiculous, until I saw one of her quotes listed by someone else. The future doesn't die, it folds. You don't hear it anymore because they folded it shut and you're on the crease. I froze. The imagery matched exactly how it felt. Not like the future had been deleted, but like it had been shut off. Tucked away. A closed book. I sent a ping to a dead drop server with a scrambled message. I need to speak to Sabine. June 21. The door opens. No one answered. Until the next morning, June 20th. I awoke to a note slipped under the door of my penthouse. There was no knock, no footsteps, just the note. Plain paper, typewritten, one night only, the station beneath the city. Bring no devices, come alone, 10 p.m. It wasn't signed, but scrawled in red ink on the back, in a rushed hand. Sabine. I knew what they meant by the station. It was a nickname for an abandoned subway line beneath the city, the ghost track they called it. Supposedly it was sealed after a chemical leak in the 80s. The truth was probably more mundane, but the urban legends persisted. That night, I wore dark clothes and took the service elevator down to the garage. I parked 5 blocks away and walked the rest, cutting through alleys, watching shadows. The entrance was through a boarded-up maintenance hatch beneath 5th and Langley. I pried it open with a crowbar and dropped down into blackness. The air hit me like a wall, damp, cold, old. I followed the tracks for almost half a mile. Every step echoed. My breath felt too loud. Then I saw the light. A single lantern hung from an exposed beam, and beside it stood a figure in a tattered trench coat, face hidden behind a netted veil. "Sabine?" I asked. She didn't answer. She turned and walked down a tunnel I hadn't seen before. I followed. The tunnel opened into a chamber that looked like a long-forgotten war room. Ancient maps, pinned strings, Tuning forks mounted on curved metal arches, machinery I didn't recognize, some made of wood, others of glass, some that looked grown rather than built. Sabine finally turned to face me. She didn't remove the veil. "You're Carter," she said. Her voice was old and young at the same time, clipped, focused, the listener. "You've heard of me. We all have. Or rather, we did, until you stopped hearing." I swallowed. Why did it stop? Sabine tilted her head. "Because something reached the edge of the story and started tearing the pages out." I felt dizzy. "What does that mean?" She turned to a blackboard. It was covered in lines, names, symbols. Across the center in large white chalk, June 21, the door opens. "You heard the knock," she said. "You heard the breath, and now you're here, caught on the fold just like the rest of us." Who's us? The echoes, the fractured, the redacted. We don't have one name, but we all share the same affliction. We remember a future that no longer wants to be heard. She leaned closer, her veil brushing my chest. "Tomorrow the door opens, and if we don't close it in time, there won't be a year from today." Sabine turned to an ancient-looking device, a rotating copper dial embedded in a wooden base, like a cross between a radio tuner and a music box. She flicked a switch, and it began to hum. Low at first, then a shrill tone layered over it. I felt it in my teeth before I heard it in my ears. "Stand still," she said. I did. The tone shifted, modulating across invisible frequencies until something broke through, a warble. Then a word, testing, another, "Please respond." A man's voice, broken, faint, like it was being pulled backward through time. Sabine snapped the dial to the left and the voice vanished. "Wait," I said. "Who was that?" "An echo," she replied, "from the other side, one of the last to transmit before the feed went dark. They're still alive in there, somewhere past the fold, but they're losing coherence." I didn't fully understand what she meant, but I knew one thing: I was done waiting. "What's through the door?" I asked. Sabine paused. Then she whispered, "Something that eats possibility." She handed me a worn leather satchel, its strap cracked with age. Inside were three objects: a tuning fork, a coil of silver wire, and a blindfold. "You'll need these," she said. "For what? To cross where?" But she didn't answer. Instead, she opened a drawer and produced a single photo. It was black and white, curled at the edges. Faint but unmistakable, it was me, standing in front of a door made of what looked like bone and static. I was blindfolded, hands raised as if mid-prayer. "What is this?" I whispered. Sabine didn't look at me. "You go through tomorrow," she said, "at 3:03 a.m. That's when the fold softens. The door will find you." "I never took this photo," I said. "No," she replied, "but someone took it of you. A year from yesterday, she walked me back to the tunnel. The whole way, she didn't say a word." I asked her if she'd be there tomorrow. She just shook her head. "Will I come back?" I asked. Sabine paused. "I don't think anyone does. Back in the motel, I barely moved." I laid the tuning fork and silver wire on the bed, staring at them like talismans. The blindfold stayed in my hands. My fingers trembled. Something that eats possibility. I checked the clock. June 20th, 11:59 p.m. The final day was here. I didn't fall asleep, but I did lose time. When I blinked, the clock read 2:47 a.m. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, dressed, blindfold in hand. I didn't remember putting on my shoes. Somewhere far off I heard it, knocking, slow, rhythmic, familiar. I wrapped the blindfold around my head. The darkness felt thick, too thick. It wasn't just a lack of sight, it was an intrusion, a pressure, like something was standing in front of me and pushing its forehead against mine. I picked up the satchel, and I opened the motel door. The hallway was gone. In its place was a corridor of infinite mirrors, stretching outward into black fog. Each pane reflected something slightly wrong, my image flinching, gasping, blinking too slowly. The knocking echoed all around me. I walked forward, using the silver wire like a tether, trailing it behind me. Every 10 steps, I struck the tuning fork and held it to my chest. The tone kept me grounded, kept me from falling, because the corridor moved. Sometimes the floor tilted. Sometimes the walls breathed. Sometimes the mirrors showed someone else, not me, but someone close. At 3:03 a.m., the knocking stopped. The fog peeled back, and I saw it. The door. It was wrong. It didn't exist the way objects do. It was a ripple in space, a rectangular fracture. Light poured from the cracks like blood under pressure. I stepped forward. Each step felt like I was being pulled apart. Before I touched the handle, I struck the tuning fork one last time and tied the silver wire to my wrist. I reached out and opened the door. The door didn't open like a door. It peeled. The edges split and curled back like burning paper, revealing not another room but a tunnel of flickering light, strobing in painful arrhythmic pulses. Not white, not yellow, not any color I can name. It was sensation made visible, light that sounded like screaming, geometry that tasted like ash. My body wanted to stop. My brain begged me not to move, but the rest of me, the part that had heard the future every day for decades, needed to know what was on the other side. I stepped through, and reality folded. At first there was only darkness. Not like blindfold dark, not absence of light dark. This was total null. No air, no direction, no heartbeat. Just the sense of falling through a memory that hadn't happened yet. I tried to breathe, but nothing entered my lungs. I tried to scream, but my throat didn't exist here. And then, I was standing. I was in a version of my old apartment, not the one I lived in now, the one I had during college. The stains on the carpet were the same. The burn mark on the kitchen counter, even the old corkboard with scribbled post-its was there. Except, I wasn't alone. There were versions of me inside. One was on the couch, scrolling his phone with that same blank stare I remembered from all those wasted days. Another was in the kitchen, pouring cereal, completely unaware of the rot bubbling in the milk. A third sat at the desk, scribbling in my old black notebook. I watched as he paused, frowned, and then looked directly at me. But I was invisible to him, I think. He blinked, shivered, and then kept writing. The door slammed shut behind me. I turned. Nothing but endless hallway. A corridor made of more doors. Some were open, some were screaming, some were shaking like they couldn't hold back what was behind them. I heard the whisper again. They've been listening to you too, only this time it came from everywhere. I moved forward. Each door I passed showed me another version of my life, tiny variations that branched off like broken veins. One version of me was homeless, screaming at the sky. Another was in a straitjacket, chewing through his own tongue. Another was in a hospital bed, surrounded by weeping strangers. Then I saw one, dressed in a suit, standing on a podium, giving a speech to a roaring crowd, and behind him a screen displayed the words, June 21st, 2025, a new timeline begins. He smiled. He looked like me, but not quite. Too smooth, too perfect, like someone had carved the humanity out of me and filled it with intent. I stepped into that door. The crowd froze, not just paused, frozen mid-blink, mid-clap, mid-cheer, as if they were just animations, paused by an unseen hand. The podium me turned to me slowly and smiled. Hello, listener. His voice was wrong. It sounded like mine run through 1,000 filters, half a second behind itself, a recording catching up to real time. Who are you? I whispered. You know who I am, he said. I'm the version of you who took control. The room warped. The frozen crowd melted into black mist. The lights flickered and died. We stood in a void, and he stepped closer. While you were listening, he said, I was learning. While you were profiting, I was mapping. And now that the future has run out, he smiled wider. I get to decide what replaces it. He opened his coat. Inside wasn't skin, it was circuitry, filaments, wires of thought. He wasn't me, not anymore. He was what I would have become if I'd stopped listening and started writing the broadcast myself. I closed the feed, he said. I'm the silence. I took a step back. He followed. Why me? I asked. You were the perfect test case, he replied. Greedy enough to use the signal, careful enough not to corrupt it, curious enough to keep asking, but passive enough to never interfere. He tapped his temple. You heard the future. I became it. The black void around us began to pulse, heartbeat rhythms in the walls of unreality. He gestured, and dozens of phantom screens appeared in the dark, flickering with fragments of news stories, headlines, surveillance feeds, algorithm predictions. Some were familiar, most weren't. I saw myself in 100 lives. In one, I was a whistleblower murdered in a parking garage. In another, a tech billionaire unveiling an AI that could predict death. In another still, I was a corpse floating in a hotel pool, empty eyes reflecting fireworks. All futures I hadn't lived, all possible, all now extinct. Where are these from? I whispered. They were all part of the feed, he said, the raw signal, untethered. And you were only hearing the crumbs, the low band, the shallow tide. I went deeper. His smile widened. I drowned. He gestured again. The screens vanished. In their place stood a door, identical to the one I stepped through earlier, except this one was alive. Its surface writhed. It pulsed with breath, and beneath it, hands, dozens, pale, grasping, trapped under the door like something had slammed them shut and locked them inside. He turned toward it. This is the final version of the timeline, he said, the last clean slate. One more rewrite, and I'll seal it permanently. You mean destroy it? I asked. I mean remove choice, he replied. Erase conflict. Possibility is chaos. Silence is peace. He tilted his head. I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want to end the noise. I stepped toward the door. I could feel it watching me. There was no peephole, no window. But I knew something was inside, something massive, intelligent, and screaming in reverse. I could hear it faintly from behind the steel. Let me out. I turned to him. You don't know what's behind it, do you? He paused, just for a second, enough to make my blood turn to ice. He didn't answer. I remembered what Sabine had said, something that eats possibility. It wasn't him. It wasn't me. It was whatever was behind that door. And if he finished the rewrite, if he folded time shut for good, if he sealed that thing inside, it wouldn't stay quiet. It would wait. And when there were no more futures left to fold, no more variations to hide in, it would have nowhere left to go but out. I struck the tuning fork. The vibration echoed in my ribs, in the air, in the timeline itself, and the phantom screens glitched. He winced. You kept the key, he hissed. I raised the fork. Sabine said it was for crossing, I said, but I think it's more than that. I think it's the signal's true pitch, the sound of an open timeline. He lunged at me. I brought the fork down, and the world shattered. When the tuning fork struck the floor, it didn't make a sound, it made a decision. The air split like wet paper. The void collapsed inward, and suddenly, I wasn't in the future anymore. I was beneath it. Imagine standing on a cliff of memory, staring down into a whirlpool of every moment that could have happened. Time here didn't pass, it bled. Not seconds or minutes, but regrets, chances, choices. I floated in a sea of echoes. I heard my mother say she was proud of me. I heard Lena whisper goodbye in 100 different ways. I heard my own voice, at 8 years old, say, I don't want to hear the future anymore. Each whisper passed through me like a current. Each one changed me, and in the center of it all was the door. But this one was different. No handles, no frame, just a scar in the air, a wound held closed by the thinnest pressure. Like time had tried to heal but failed. Around it swirled pieces of unfinished lives, a child's drawing, a prescription bottle, a wedding ring with no inscription. This was the origin point, the first time the signal had bled through, the first door ever opened, and it was holding something back. I felt it inside, moving, waiting, feeding. I saw movement in the corner of my eye. Him, the version of me that had rewritten the feed, that had silenced the signal. He was broken now, fractured, his form flickering between faces, moments, choices. He staggered forward. You don't understand, he whispered. It wasn't me. I didn't close it. I was trying to stop it. I stepped back. You lied. I tried to erase myself to keep it from using me. I thought if I collapsed the timelines, I'd trap it behind the fold. He dropped to his knees. But it was never trapped. It's always been inside us. He looked up at me. It used our futures as tunnels. It needed listeners, echoes. We were never receivers. We were hosts. The door cracked, just a hairline fracture. But I felt it in my teeth. Something was pushing through. Something impossibly large and entirely aware of me. I raised the tuning fork again, but it didn't hum this time. It screamed. The fracture widened. And then she appeared. Sabine, but not as I'd last seen her. She was glowing now, lit from within by shifting frequencies. Time bent around her presence like a magnet near a compass. You found it, she said. I nodded, trembling. I don't know how to stop it, I said. The signal's gone. The door's open. The future, she raised a finger. The future isn't gone, Carter. It's watching. It's waiting for you. She pressed something into my hand, a second tuning fork, slightly out of phase, slightly shorter. This one plays the tone of choice. Not probability, not destiny, just pure possibility. Behind me, the door shrieked. The thing inside was clawing now, punching sound through the crack. It was voices layered in wrongness, screams that bent backward. Words spoken in reverse time. Let me in. Sabine looked at me, eyes filled with shimmering static. You have to strike them together, Carter. Future and choice. That's the only way to fold it shut and lock it from both sides. What happens to me? I asked. She smiled sadly. Nothing future-shaped ever comes back the same. The floor beneath me cracked. The fracture grew, and the thing inside saw me. I felt its gaze, a weightless pull that spoke in instinct, not language. Something so old and massive it had no name, no face, only hunger. It had been eating futures one whisper at a time. Now it wanted everything. I raised both forks, one in each hand, future and choice. I struck them together. The sound wasn't a sound, it was a reset. The moment the tuning forks collided, the world inverted. I didn't fall, I reversed. The black scar of the door shrieked and flared white hot, then sealed shut, not like a lock, but like it was never supposed to be open in the first place. The sound that followed wasn't a boom or a crack, it was absence. I felt time recoil, all of it. I landed hard, but not on a floor, on a date, June 15th. Today, again, but this time, different. The room was my condo, but stripped of modern comfort. The digital clock on my nightstand blinked 12 like the power had just come back. The windows showed an unfamiliar skyline, darker, distant. I didn't recognize the shapes of the buildings. I stumbled toward the living room. The television was already on. News footage flickered. Static. Then, we interrupt this broadcast with breaking news. Worldwide signal disruptions have ended. Time wave anomalies have normalized, at least for now. The anchor paused, clearly shaken. Experts are calling it an echo event, a brief, inexplicable moment in which the very concept of tomorrow collapsed. Governments across the globe are now investigating a figure known only by a code name, the listener. No known photo, no traceable ID, only an audio file recovered from beneath an abandoned facility in Colorado. The audio clip played, and it was my voice, not from today, not from now, from the fold. It whispered, "Don't open the door." I shut off the TV and stared at my hands. Both tuning forks were gone, the satchel was gone, but the memory, the choice remained. I had reset something, but it hadn't erased me, it had split me. On instinct, I checked the time, 3:02 a.m. Seconds ticked past, no voices, no sounds from the future, just silence. Not terrifying, not ominous, just clean, empty, new. I didn't sleep. I watched the sun rise over the strange new skyline and thought of all the futures that no longer existed. Of all the me's I'd seen, some dead, some thriving, some monstrous, and some, like me, just tired. I thought of Edgar, of Sabine, of that version of me that had rewritten the timeline so thoroughly he forgot what it meant to be human. And I knew I wouldn't go back to who I was before. I wouldn't trade stocks. I wouldn't chase whispers. I wouldn't wait for signals. Because from this point forward, there would be no more feed. But something strange happened that afternoon. I opened my desk drawer to look for a pen. Inside was a single photograph, curled, black and white, of me, blindfolded, standing in front of the door. I stared at the photograph for a long time. It hadn't been there before. And it wasn't just any photo. It was the exact one Sabine had shown me beneath the city. Same blindfold, same faint shimmer on the edges, same impossible perspective. I should have burned it. Instead, I turned it over. On the back in small, neat handwriting, not mine, were the words, "You made a choice. Now live with it. No name, no date, just that." And as I stared, the paper warmed, faintly, like it remembered where it had come from. That night, I dreamed for the first time in what felt like months. But it wasn't a dream. Not really. I was in the listening room again. The machines were silent. The floor was clean. The walls had no burn marks, and Sabine was sitting cross-legged in the corner. "Did I do it?" I asked. "You did something," she said. "You didn't stop it. You delayed it. Then what now?" Sabine tilted her head. "You live, you warn, you listen without taking, without profiting. The silence gave you a second chance. But the thing behind the door is still hungry." I swallowed. "It's not dead?" Sabine smiled, sadly. "Nothing that ancient dies, it just waits." I woke up with her words still in my head. Waits. That day I went for a walk. A long one. No phone. No wallet. Just me. The city felt off. The people smiled, but their eyes didn't. The traffic lights all blinked in perfect sync. Too perfect. A child ran past me on the sidewalk, holding something in his hand. I nearly dismissed it until I saw what it was. A tuning fork, exactly like mine. I chased after him, heart hammering. "Where did you get that?" I asked. The boy looked up, confused, unafraid. "It was in the mailbox," he said. "No name on it." I knelt beside him. "Did you hear anything when you held it?" He nodded slowly. A voice, what did it say? The boy frowned, thinking. Then he whispered, "They're almost here." I walked home in a daze. The signal was gone. but its resonance, whatever frequency it rode, was still echoing, not forward, not backward, but sideways, like a ripple through timelines never lived. And now other people were starting to hear it. That night I turned on every speaker I had. White noise, static, silence, and then, faintly, beneath the hum of the air conditioner I heard it. Not a whisper, not a message, a heartbeat. 1, then 2, then 3, measured, deliberate, coming from inside the walls. I pressed my hand to the drywall. The heartbeat pulsed again. Slow, steady, as if the building itself had blood moving behind its structure. But it wasn't mechanical, it wasn't plumbing, it was alive, and it was listening. I stepped back, and it stopped, just like that. I stood in silence for several long minutes, straining to hear anything else, a click, a breath, even the soft drone of the city below. Nothing, only my own breath shaky in my throat, and then, knock, 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 3 times, from inside the wall. I backed away slowly, reaching for the tuning fork I hadn't touched since the door. I hadn't even known I'd brought it back, but it was there, in the drawer beneath the old journal. I held it in my hand and waited. No more knocks came, just that oppressive quiet. That heavy, pregnant hush, the kind that says something isn't over, it's just watching. The next morning I did something I hadn't done in years. I went back to Lena's. I told myself I just needed someone to talk to, someone who still felt real. But the truth was I wanted to see if she had started hearing anything, if the ripples were spreading. She opened the door with the same suspicious look she always gave me, like I was a ghost from a past she didn't believe in anymore. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I said, "not even a little." I told her everything. Not in the abstract, not vague hints, everything. The voices, the fold, the door, Sabine, the decision. The thing behind the decision. She didn't interrupt, didn't laugh, didn't mock me. When I was done, she sat back in her chair and said quietly, "I've been dreaming about doors for weeks." Her dreams weren't like mine. In hers, the doors were endless, white, windowless. Each time she opened one, she stepped into a version of her life that felt almost right, but wasn't. A different coffee table, a missing scar, a father who didn't die. And each time she turned around to leave, the door was gone. I thought I was going crazy, she said. "But now," she trailed off, "I think you brought something back with you, Carter." My heart seized. "You think I opened it?" She shook her head. "I think, whatever it is, it doesn't need the door anymore." Later that night, I combed through every corner of my penthouse. I disconnected the smart systems. I checked for bugs, cameras, anything that could explain the knock, the heartbeat, the tuning fork in the boy's hand. I found nothing. But I did find the photo. It had moved. It wasn't in the drawer anymore. It was sitting on my pillow, and someone had crossed out the original note. Underneath, in red ink, "You didn't close it. You brought it home." I burned the photo, watched the paper curl into black ash in the kitchen sink. But I knew it wouldn't matter. You can't destroy what isn't physical. You can't burn a shadow that walks behind your thoughts. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. Not voices, not words, breathing. Like someone standing just inches behind me, matching my rhythm, mimicking my exhales, until they got just slightly out of sync. Deliberately so. Mocking, imitating, waiting. I packed a go bag and drove north without a destination in mind. I needed distance, space, some kind of buffer between me and the thing I'd apparently brought back through the door. I passed through small towns, sleeping gas stations, truck stops that hummed with white light and static silence. I kept the radio off, windows up, eyes forward. But the feeling never left. It was in the passenger seat, or behind me, or in the static between thoughts. Something had changed. The world was the same, but I wasn't. And it knew. It had followed me out of the fold, not just as a presence, as a possibility. On the third day, I stopped in a nowhere town called Latchfield. Population maybe 200, enough to hide in. I rented a motel room, one of those long one-story roadside things where the number on the door barely clings to the wood. The room smelled like dust and sun-bleached carpet, the kind of place forgotten people forget themselves in. Perfect. I spent the first night staring at the ceiling. The second night, I heard the knocking again, this time from outside. 3 knocks, no footsteps. I didn't answer, didn't move. By morning, there were no prints in the dirt outside, but the tuning fork sat on the hood of my car. That afternoon, I found a library in town, barely staffed, dusty, still using paper checkout cards. I combed through books on folklore, physics, dimensional theory, anything that might tell me what I'd unleashed. And in a local self-published history book, Latchfield, Echoes from the Edge, I found something that stopped me cold. A chapter titled, The Man Who Heard Tomorrow. It described a traveler who came through town in 1952, said he claimed to hear voices from the future, said he warned of an invisible threshold, said that on June 21st something would try to push through, said he disappeared the next day, and next to the passage was a photo, old, faded, but unmistakable. Edgar. He hadn't disappeared. He'd gone back, or maybe sideways, or maybe he'd never left this place at all. I stared at the photograph in the book for nearly 10 minutes, afraid to blink. He looked the same weathered face, same wire-rimmed glasses, same hollow gaze like he was seeing through time instead of looking at it. The caption read, Unidentified man photographed outside Latchfield Library, June 20th, 1952, 73 years ago. And yet I'd met him last week. He had been trying to stop this far longer than I ever realized. He wasn't just an echo. He might have been the first one. I took the book to the front desk, hoping to borrow it. The old librarian looked at me with confusion. We don't have that in our system, she said. Must have been left by someone. Can I take it? She blinked, hesitated, then nodded. If you think you need it. I left with the book tucked under my arm and found a second tuning fork placed on the windshield of my car. This one was cracked. Hairline, right along the base. It hummed faintly when I picked it up. Off key. Back at the motel, I spread out everything I had on the bed. The 2 tuning forks, one cracked, one whole. The leather satchel. The black and white photo, still unburnt. I checked the sink ashes 3 times and it always returned. Edgar's notes, the Latchfield book, my old journal, the silver wire, and I realized something. Every one of these items had crossed some kind of threshold. They didn't just belong to one timeline. They were echoes themselves, artifacts from folds, fragments, pasts that had bled forward through the seams. And now they were collecting again. I called Lena. I didn't know why. I just needed a voice that hadn't come from behind a wall. She answered on the second ring. I heard the knocking again, she said before I could speak. My blood turned to ice. Outside? I asked. No. This time, it came from my closet. Silence. Then, Carter, it said your name. I left Latchfield that night. I didn't tell her I was coming. I just drove through cornfields and ghost-thin highways, past headlights that blinked out when I got too close. When I reached her house, the porch light was off. The windows dark. I knocked 3 times. Not a sound. Then the door creaked open, and Lena stood there, eyes wide, and whispered,
It's inside now. It's inside now.
She said it like someone admitting a slow, quiet death, not a scream. Not a panic, just that soft, resigned acceptance of something already too late to undo. I stepped into her house without a word. Everything looked the same as I remembered. Same coffee-stained couch, same framed photograph of her and her dad, same crooked hallway mirror. But it felt different, thicker, heavier, like the air had mass, like I was walking through someone else's memory of the place instead of the place itself. She closed the door behind me, slowly, then locked it. Without looking up, she said, "It talks when the lights go off." She led me to the living room. Every light in the house was on. Lamps, closets. Even the glow from the microwave clock had been brightened somehow. "I haven't slept in 2 days," she said. "It whispers when I blink." "What does it say?" I asked. She turned to me, and that was when I noticed her hands were shaking. "It asks if I remember you," she whispered. I checked the house, room by room. Every closet, every crawl space, every mirror. I even pressed my ear against the walls again. This time, no heartbeat, no breathing, just static, faint, like radio waves coming through a pillow. It was everywhere, in the vents, in the pipes, in the structure. The fold hadn't just followed me, it had infested reality. "I brought these," I told her, laying out the tuning forks, the wire, the photo, the book. She stared at the cracked fork for a long time. "What happens if we strike them together again?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Last time it collapsed a version of the future. Maybe this time it collapses now." She reached out, ran a finger along the tuning fork's edge. "What if that's the only way to kill it?" We both went silent, and then from the hallway behind us we heard it. Knock, knock, knock. I grabbed the tuning forks. She grabbed the photo. We moved toward the sound together. It came from her bedroom door. It was closed, no shadow beneath it. No draft, just stillness. I raised the good fork. "On 3, I whispered. She nodded. 1, the lights flickered. 2, the photo in her hand began to vibrate. And from the other side of the door we heard a voice, not a whisper, a perfect imitation of mine. "Lena, it's me. Please let me in." Her face went pale. She looked at me, then at the door, then back at me. "It's not you," she whispered. The voice behind the door tried again, same inflection, same rhythm. "I brought the wire, remember? I told you it's inside now. Please, let me in." I raised the tuning fork and held it to her chest. "Do you trust me?" I asked. Tears welled in her eyes. "Yes." I struck both forks together. The air snapped. The photo ignited in her hands, and the door at the end of the hallway peeled open like it had been built from thin skin, and from the darkness behind it, the fold stepped through. It wore me. Same build, same posture, same tired eyes, but its smile was all wrong. Too wide, too symmetrical. Like someone had studied me in photographs and built a version of me from the outside in. Lena screamed. I pulled her behind me, raising the tuning forks like they were weapons. My arms trembled, but not from fear, from recognition, because what stepped through the doorway wasn't just wearing my skin. It was me, or a version of me that had never stopped listening, a version that had never turned away. "Carter," it said, voice perfect, smooth, gentle. "Why are you afraid of yourself?" Its feet didn't quite touch the floor. Every step it took left the carpet untouched, like it didn't weigh anything, like the idea of its body was just an afterthought. "Don't listen," I hissed to Lena. "It's not thinking, it's echoing." She pressed herself against the wall, trembling. The thing tilted its head at me. "I've heard every second of your life," it said. "Every choice you almost made, every version you buried. I've tasted them all." It raised its hand. From its palm, a new door unfolded. The door. Smooth. Seamless, breathing, a perfect replica of the first. "I brought this for you," it said. I gripped the cracked fork tighter. "What do you want?" I asked. The thing stepped closer. "I don't want anything," it said. "You're the one who wants. To fix, to undo, to know. I am just the end of all your wants." His eyes darkened. "You opened me once, you'll do it again. It's your nature." "No," I said. It grinned wider. "You're already listening." And I was, because underneath the voice I could hear them again. Faint, distorted, familiar. The future. Tiny fragments. A news report. A baby crying. A scream echoing down a stairwell. Lena's voice whispering, "I forgive you." My own voice, breaking, saying, "I didn't mean to." Gunfire. Then, silence. I shook the tuning forks like I could beat the signal out of my head. "You're just an echo," I shouted. "You don't own me." The thing moved fast, so fast it blurred. It was inches from me, face inches from mine. Its breath smelled like static, like old speakers, like dust and electricity and burned wires. "You think you're special," it whispered, "but you're just the speaker. I am the voice." I struck the forks. Together, again, again. The air howled, the house shuddered, and the thing screamed not in fear, in fury. The hallway began to fold, not collapse, fold, like paper creasing in space. The walls bled wallpaper patterns into themselves. The lights spun backward into darkness. The door behind the thing sucked in light. It screamed again and lunged. Lena threw the silver wire. I caught it, wrapped it around both forks and drove them forward. Into the door. There was no sound, only deletion. The moment the forks struck the door, wrapped in the silver wire like a conductor of impossible voltage, the world turned inside out. Not visually, not physically, conceptually. Reality didn't shatter. It forgot what it was supposed to be. For half a second, I was aware of every version of myself. The failures, the monsters, the martyrs, the cowards, the ones who opened the door willingly, the ones who never had the chance. All of them cried out at once, not in pain, in relief. And the thing that had worn my skin, the echo in me, made one last sound, not a scream, not a howl, but a breath, sharp, surprised, afraid. Then it vanished. So did the door. The hallway straightened. The light steadied. The wallpaper stopped breathing, and I collapsed. Lena knelt beside me. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady. "Carter," she whispered. "Look at me." I opened my eyes. "I'm still here," I said, stunned. "So am I." We sat there in the hallway, silent as morning light filtered through the curtains. The world didn't end. The fold hadn't consumed us. But something in the air had changed, like the pressure had dropped just slightly, like a storm had passed through, not over, but through. I looked down at the tuning forks in my lap, both cracked now, both blackened at the tips, and when I touched them for the first time in years, I heard nothing. No static, no whispers, no future, just now. We burned the photo together. This time it didn't return. We buried the tuning forks in concrete. Lena painted over the hallway door. And I deleted every last journal entry I'd ever written. We made a pact, no more listening, no more looking, no more chasing the tomorrow that never wanted us in it. I moved in with her the next week. The world felt quiet in a way it hadn't since I was a child. No voices in the vents, no knocks in the night, no folds in the walls. Just now, just us, until the postcard came. The postcard arrived on the morning of June 21st. No return address, no stamp, just slipped into the mailbox like it had always been there. Lena brought it inside without opening it. Her hands were trembling again. She didn't have to say anything. I already felt it. I took it from her and flipped it over. It was a photo of a motel room, faded, slightly distorted like it had been photocopied through a mirror. There was a figure standing by the window, me, blindfolded, facing away from the camera. On the back, written in tight, delicate cursive, "We fold again when the light dies. Thank you for showing us the door." No name, no signature, just that. I burned it without hesitation. But that night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't stop staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly overhead. Its blades made no sound, but they cast a rhythmic, circling shadow across the walls, like a hand, waving or reaching. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself the fold was gone. But deep down, I knew the truth. You can't silence something that isn't trying to speak. You can't lock out something that doesn't need doors anymore. We moved away 2 weeks later. Bought a cabin in the mountains. No electricity, no radios, no white noise machines. We grew vegetables, read real books. We stayed off the grid. The silence was real here. Undisturbed, unburdened, but some nights it feels too still, like something is holding its breath. Once I walked into the woods and found a child's shoe half buried beneath a pine tree. It was warm to the touch. Another time I heard 3 knocks on the cabin door. When I opened it, no one was there, but a tuning fork lay on the doormat. Perfect, untouched, waiting. I didn't pick it up. I buried it beneath 6 feet of stone and salt, but I can still hear it, not with my ears, with something beneath them. Like a memory that isn't mine, or a signal, paused just long enough to let me think it's over. Tomorrow will be June 22nd, 1 year to the day since I first heard the word run. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I did, or if I'm still standing at the threshold, hand outstretched, waiting for the door to open one last time. The wind changed this morning. I noticed it before I even opened my eyes, just a pressure behind my eyelids, a faint hum, not sound, not quite, more like the memory of sound, like the future had taken a breath again. Lena was still asleep beside me, her hand draped over mine. Her face was peaceful, her breathing steady. I didn't want to move, didn't want to wake her, didn't want to test whether the silence was still true. But something inside me, a pulse, a whisper of instinct, told me that today was different. I rose and stepped outside. The mountains were quiet, no bird song, no wind through the trees, just stillness. And on the porch rail, the journal, my old one, the one I burned. The leather was charred at the corners, but intact. And when I opened it, every page had been rewritten, not by me, not in my hand. Each page was filled with future dates, events, moments, some minor, some catastrophic, some impossible, and all of them ended the same way. June 21st, the door opens. I slammed the book shut, but my hands were shaking, because on the final page, scrawled in red ink, same as always, were 3 words. You listened again. Inside, Lena was still asleep, still breathing softly, still unaware. But when I turned, I saw it, just for a second, just in the corner of the room, a figure, me, standing in the reflection of the window, blindfolded, head tilted, smiling. I blinked, gone. I don't know what I brought back through that door. I don't know if I ever closed it. Maybe the door doesn't need hinges anymore. Maybe it's inside me. Maybe it's become me. Or maybe I'm the echo now, a memory of a man who couldn't let go of tomorrow, a whisper waiting for someone else to hear me. So if you're reading this, if you found this journal, if you're hearing sounds that don't belong in this day, don't follow them, don't listen, don't answer the knock. And above all, don't open the door, because once you do, you'll never be able to tell which voice is yours.